Hello, everybody. Today I found myself with a free day again. So I had some jobs to do outside and they got cancelled because of this snow. So I thought, okay, what a perfect time to use to make a video. Now, I have been fully intending to make a video reviewing properly this committee meeting that happened on Tuesday to close the bridge. But to be honest with you, every time I try to watch the footage back, it just makes me feel sick. So I thought, I'm not going to do that now. We can do that later. I'll get round to that at a later date. But today I thought I wanted to have a bit of fun with this video, and to celebrate the fact that this channel seems to have caught on and has just passed the 100 subscriber threshold. It's actually on 107 now, so thank you all for that. I just thought I would tell you a story which is relevant to this. Something from my background that happened about a year or two ago. I want to tell you the story now about how I successfully challenged and repealed 2 PCNs which were issued to me after I drove through the Mill Road bus gate the last time it was closed. Okay, so this is directly relevant to this. It's not quite the same, but it is interesting, and I wanted to share this with you because I know that there's going to be several of you out there who will find this particularly entertaining. And, food for thought, as they say. And if you want food for thought, then you can have a bloody feast on this one. So, this story is a bit convoluted. It took me about just over a year to go through all of this. So I've written all the points out. This story is broken down into 3 parts. Okay? And I'm just going to go through it with you point by point. This starts in February 2021. Okay, and that was still during the pandemic. There was a lockdown, and just to give you a little bit of background of what was going on at that time. The shops were shut, obviously, but we were still doing web orders and things, and I had kind of found myself being a delivery driver quite a few times a week during that time, just to keep the cash trickling in and keep the business ticking over, doing everything I could to keep it running. And so I was driving all around town during those days, and I had no idea that they'd closed Mill Road. I was not aware of this. Forgive me for my ignorance, but I was just driving around doing my job. And in February 2021, I drove down Mill Road twice, and didn't think anything of it because I wasn't aware. All right, it was an open road. It had been, one side of it had been cordoned off, but I could still go down. I went up there, did my delivery, came back down, and there was another one a couple of days later, I think. Anyway, didn't think anything of it. So that was February 2021. Now, it wasn't until August, like 6 months later, that I actually received the PCNs. And I remember opening them and was like, what? Why would I be getting these PCNs so late? And for something which I didn't even know about, and is obviously legally invalid because they didn't go through the proper planning procedures. I didn't even know that they'd closed the bridge. Anyway, so I just dismissed them. I put the PCNs down. I thought, right, I'm not going to deal with that. There was too much other things going on at that time. And you know what it was like? During the pandemic, the country pretty much closed down. And still in, summer of 2021, it wasn't fully up and running again. There were still all kinds of questions about when things were going to get back to normal. And so I looked at these PCNs. I was like, well, that's bullshit. Excuse my language. I just put it down. Forgot about them. And that was in August 2021. And again, a full 6 months after that, in December, I received these. I got 2 of them at the same time. Orders for recovery. Yeah, here they are. Order for recovery of unpaid penalty charge. And I looked at it, I was like, what is this? Mill Road outbound, contravention, 22nd of February 2021. That was like earlier, and that was 10 months ago. I was like, oh, what that? They're chasing that up. What's taken them so long? And then, as you can see, they've pushed the price right up. So when you get a PCN, it's £60, £30 if you pay it within 14 days. But they've pushed this up to £90 plus £9 for the court fee. So £99, and they've given me 2 of them. Right? £198. I was like, well, I'm not going to have that. And especially seeing as this has taken them 10 months to chase this up, this is all wrong. And you know me, I'm somebody who has an eye for detail, and I want to hold my my governors to account if they make administrative errors, which they had obviously done here. So I looked down this thing, and basically, if you want to refute or make a representation against a charge like this, you've got some grounds. Basically, the grounds for rejecting this was that I did not receive the notice to owner. And now, for anybody who doesn't understand how these PCN systems work, basically, you get issued a PCN first. You got 28 days to pay that. If you don't pay within 28 days, then you get a notice to owner, which is basically a reminder, and then you have another 28 days to respond to that. If you still don't respond to that, then you get a recovery order, which is essentially a court order. Okay, that's why they push the price up. But in this case, I didn't get the notice to owner. It went straight from PCN to recovery of unpaid charges. And 10 months afterwards, I might add. This is supposed to take place within 28 days. And they took 10 months to chase this up finally. Anyway, so I circled these. You did not receive the notice to owner. But then I noticed that the date on this was the 11th of November, right? And you must represent or pay within 21 days. Now, I didn't receive this until December, right? So even the date of the thing and this order for recovery arrived with me 4 weeks late. So by the time I even opened it and it arrived through my letterbox, the time had already elapsed. So I was like, well, this is just not good enough. So anyway, I quickly jumped to action. I went to the county court on East Road, and I wrote this. Where is it? Here. I wrote this. This is a statement. Extra time needed. PCN number here and here. Hello, I am writing urgently to apply for a time extension because I have only just received these notices after their deadline lapsed. You are given 3 weeks to reply. The date of these notices is the 11th of November, and they did not arrive with me until December, and now I realise it is already 4 weeks since. I need to go to the court to witness my appeal, so I need about 14 more days to get everything in on time. Many thanks, William Bennell. And that was received and stamped on the 14th of December. And then I've received this letter back from the Tribunal Service, Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service. Dear Sir/Madam, your application for a time extension has been granted. Okay, so I got myself some extra time. Now I had until the 14th of January to complete to make the appeal. Okay, so extra time granted. That was on 14th of December. Yeah. So next thing I did, I took the recovery orders and I made a representation against them on this ground. I did not receive the notice to owner, and I wrote this. Not proper notice, no warning given, no paperwork issued, no grace period, notice to owner not sent out, skipped straight to the court stage ahead of due process. Signed 7th of Jan, witnessed by the clerk Alan Croft at the county court and stamped. That happened. Two of those I sent out. That was sent out on the 7th of January. And then on the 14th of January, I received these notices, this letter from the county court, 2 of these, official looking statement thingy, to the applicant, Cambridgeshire County Council Parking Services, penalty charge number there. The respondent filed a statutory declaration/witness statement on the 11th of Jan. It is ordered that the order for recovery of unpaid penalty charge be revoked. It is further ordered that the charge certificate and the notice to owner/enforcement notice will be cancelled. There. Okay, so that one has been stopped. But then it says here, it's important to note this. This order does not cancel the original penalty charge notice. You should contact the local authority as they may well take further action on it. Okay, so I'm thinking that is a I've successfully managed to have the thing blocked and pushed back by the court. And then then from that point it gets bounced back to the county court, and that is the end of part 1 of this convoluted saga. So now here's part 2, trying again. Basically what happened from that point on is the council went back to square one. They started from scratch and they issued me with 2 fresh PCNs. Here they are. And there's me driving 2 of them. So they've decided to go through the process again. They're issuing me with the PCNs and I've got to pay them or make a representation. That arrived with me on they were issued on the 4th of February 2022. And so by this point, it's worth remembering and pointing out that this had been pretty much an entire year since the original contravention. Plus, I should point out that the bus gate had actually already been removed by this point. So they were chasing me up on a PCN for something which no longer even existed, which hadn't been set up properly using normal planning permission processes, but had been rushed through because of the COVID pandemic. And I was being charged for it, even though they'd taken such a long time to get back to me. Anyway, it was just all wrong. It's completely incompetent of these boobs, these absolute boobs, to try to do this to me. So, once again, I made my representation. I made it clearly this time, within the time limit. And this is what I said, and this is where I think that it gets enjoyable, because I don't actually remember writing this, but I read this morning. I fished it out of my little box, and so this is where it has relevance to today's situation, right? So this is the representation I made to the council on the 10th of February, 2022. This road restriction was put in place without going through the proper planning process during the COVID times and were pushed through to the action stage without the public having been made aware of the change. I did not know there was a restriction until months after the event, and a PCN was issued, which I successfully got revoked by the Traffic Enforcement Centre. Subsequent to this event, the restrictions have been removed because they were not needed in the first place, may have been experimental, or rushed and deemed not legally valid, or a combination of these factors. As such, the prosecuting of this PCN is arbitrary, and William Burnell is being prosecuted for a reason which has no benefit to society, and he is being punished for no real reason. He caused no loss, harm, nor injury, and in fact, the prosecuting of this PCN will cause him undue financial loss in what is already a most difficult time. The fact that this road restriction has since been removed adds credence to the argument that this is an administrative exercise in frivolity, arbitrary and pointless prosecution, with not one person benefiting in any way. As such, William Burnell is representing against this PCN on the grounds that it is frivolous and arbitrary and has no benefit to society, and will cause him considerable stress in adding to the burdens of his financial struggles. As a closing statement, William Burnell wishes to point out that proper authority does not come imposed from above, but comes from the consent of the governed. When the governing body lapses into incoherence, arbitrary rule, pointless execution of meaningless out-of-date rules, to the general injury of those they govern, it is the right and obligation of the citizen to push back and disobey. William Burnell humbly asks that this PCN be revoked for the reasons stated above. There! Have that! Whew, it gives me goosebumps, even reading it. I can't even believe I wrote that. And I sent that off to them as well. So I sent that off on the 10th. Alright, and the next day, the very next day, they received it. And then so they issue this on the 11th. Notice of rejection of representations. Oh, well, that wasn't much of a surprise to me, but still, we'll see how this goes. What happens next? They say this: we have considered your representations received on the 10th about the PCN notice issued on the 4th, and have taken into account everything you say. However, there are not sufficient reasons to cancel the PCN, which is now payable. This letter explains the details of the penalty issued, our reasons for rejecting your representation, and your options. Okay? And then they actually go on to say this. I am aware that you received a second PCN at the same bus gate later on. While the PCN was issued correctly, I have cancelled it because we do not want our enforcement of this restriction to be unduly harsh. So they're trying to be fair. They're trying to be fair to me there. They've cancelled one of the PCNs. So at this point, I've succeeded it from being a double PCN back down to a single PCN. So then they go on to say all the reasons why it was right that they issued the PCN in the first place. Here are all the notices that they put up so that everybody could be aware that the bus gate was in existence. So they're basically saying, look, we gave you loads of notice, everyone knows about it, it was issued correctly, so you've still got to pay, but to be fair to you, we're going to cancel off one and just make you pay just one on its own. And if you pay within 14 days, it won't be £60, it will be £30. So at that point, I'm thinking, wow, that's a good result. So I managed to get it essentially what was at one point a £198 fine, down to a £30 fine. So I had succeeded quite considerably, and so I'm thinking, oh, that's good. So I could just pay the £30 and it will all go away. Not that this thing was troubling me too much, but I had a choice because there was still that part of me that thought the bus gate was wrong in the first place. Right? No matter what they say with all of these reasons, actually closing Mill Road Bridge was wrong. And they had reopened it again, which to me meant that it was wrong and it was right to reopen, and they should have reopened it and they never should have closed it in the first place. So me paying this £30, even though it would have been, much less expensive than originally it was going to be, and you could see that they were trying to be fair to me, there was just still that part of me that thought, it's just not right. So then I had the choice. You must now decide whether to pay or to appeal. And that's where we end part 2 of this story. Because, as you might be able to guess from the trajectory of this tale which I'm telling, I didn't pay. And I decided to appeal. So what happened next? Part 3. Appealing to the Traffic Penalty Tribunal. I've lost my paperwork here. Hang on. What the fuck? Oh, here we go. How to appeal. If you disagree with the council's decision, you can appeal to the independent adjudicator at the Traffic Penalty Tribunal. The adjudicators are independent of the council and their decision is final. You see, so by choosing to appeal, I was either going to successfully have the thing overturned or I was going to have to pay £60. All right, so it's not much of a risk, really. I thought it was worth it. It's worth a shot, don't you think? It's always worth fighting the good fight, even if you don't think you're going to win. You've got to give it a good go anyway, because you never know. You might just be surprised. So what happened then? This was on the 24th of February. I appeal to the tribunal, and they set up my case. And here it is, look at that, very fancy. You get a little account on this online thing where they have all the summary, they have all the evidence, and you can submit your appeal. Here it is. Mr. William Bennell versus Cambridgeshire County Council, Bus Lane. So what happens next is that you get to put in your appeal and submit that to them, and then the independent adjudicator lawyer type people would read it over and they see whether it's got any... whether it's based on any good grounds. And so here's what I said. My argument for appealing against this PCN is basically this. 1. This bus lane was created during the COVID pandemic as part of an experimental road restriction, and it was put up very quickly without normal procedures of planning and public being made aware. I did not even realise I had driven through a bus gate until months later when a PCN arrived. 2. Initially, it took such a long time for this to be processed, I did not know anything about it, and after more than a year, a court order arrived, which I successfully got the court to revoke because the authority had not issued me a notice to owner. They skipped straight to the court stage, so it was void. Now they have reissued the PCN, but it is over a year since the original contravention. I have appealed, and the rejection letter was sent. 3. My grounds for appealing now is this bus gate has been removed and you can drive freely on that road. So this whole affair is pointless and has no useful function. The experimental road restriction was removed and no longer exists, so in effect I am paying a fine for nothing. 4. Precedent. I recently drove into the ULEZ zone of London in October 2021. It had just been implemented 5 days previously and I had no idea of its existence. 3 weeks later, Transport for London wrote to me informing me of the ULEZ and said, on this occasion we are issuing you with a warning. In future we will issue a PCN. That is fair and reasonable and known as a grace period. This matter with the Mill Road bus gate is nothing of this sort. The manner it was handled was so cack-handed and mangled, it took so long for the council to act, and initially they acted incorrectly, and now the bus gate does not even exist anyway. So what is this all about, really? 5. I also argue that, as an ETRO, experimental traffic regulation order, this kind of operation is inherently experimental and has no precedent in the history of our legal experience. And if the government are going to experiment with the public realm, so as this example, they should be prepared for uncertain results. Members of the public should not be liable for the results of an experiment if they are later deemed unnecessary or pointless, which in this case it is. There must be some clause or passage in the legislation which limits the liability of unwitting members of the public if the ETRO is later deemed unnecessary, and if the council takes so long to act, the incident itself is in the past with no future considerations necessary. 6. This is just a matter of enforcing control over the public, which I agree is important sometimes when the circumstances call for it, but in this case it is a pointless exercise, and the only person losing out is me, for the sake of £30, which I am only going to spend on other bills and debts anyway. So can we not please just drop this case and let this go? Many thanks, Will. And there you go. Once again, when I reread that, I'd forgotten the contents of it, but I can't really believe that I actually wrote that and sent it off. I sent that on the 24th of February, over a year since this whole thing began. And then on the 1st of March, I open my email box and I see a message. A new message from Robert Dexter, the administrator. Open it. It says, appeal not registered. Dear Mr. Bennell, the council have decided not to contest the appeal and the PCN has been cancelled. There is therefore no need for the appeal to proceed and nothing for Mr. Bennell to pay. Yours sincerely, Tribunal Admin. There you go. Wonderful. It's gone. So I just write back to him. That is very welcome news and a win for sense and reason. Thank you, Robert, and all the team at the tribunal. Have a lovely evening. Will. So there you are. There you have it. There is the story of how I successfully managed to repeal 2 PCNs which were issued during the last time last time Mill Road Bridge was closed. Okay. So there are undoubtedly lessons to be learned in that. This will not work again because the situation is very different actually. And I have thought about this a lot. So not to go over it in too much, not to waffle on too aimlessly about it, but the main point is to say this experience with the last bus gate was to do with an experimental traffic regulation order, right? And I got the thing dropped, I think, mainly because of the fact I was arguing against the validity of experimenting and making other people liable for the results of your own experiment. You know what I mean? That's just wrong. Now, what we would be looking at in the future closure of Mill Road is a transport regulation order. They haven't got the E, it's just the TRO, and that is long established in English law. So you wouldn't be able to argue against it on such grounds. So there are lots of ways to look at it. So the future challenge, which would come after they close the bus gate, after they close the bridge this summer, which they say they're going to do, would have to be done in a different way and argued in a different way. You wouldn't be able to just refuse to pay it and say, it happened before, it can happen again, because it's slightly different this time. And I definitely wouldn't advocate people getting into refuting PCNs just for the sake of it, because you don't agree with it, because you can get into a lot of trouble that way, and the costs can mount very quickly. You know, if you don't know what you're doing, they can really come down hard on you. But if you do know what you're doing, there are ways that you can have this thing bounced around, and you can delay it, you can appeal it, you can argue against it. And if the case is strong enough, and if the case is convincing enough for the independent tribunal adjudicators to agree with you, then it may very well get cancelled. And so this has been on my mind this whole time this has been going on. I've known that I wanted to make a video about this at some point. Today seemed appropriate. But as this thing goes on, and these traffic restriction orders are put in place, and PCNs start to get issued, I am going to be looking for ways to challenge them through the courts, just because they are based on illegitimate principles. Basically, the data wasn't there, the consultation was fudged, all of the things that we know. It's just about building that case, putting the evidence together into a package so that it is irrefutable, so that an independent adjudicator can look at it and go, actually, you know what, you're right, the council is in the wrong in this case, you do not have to pay this fine. And if we can get that to happen, the whole thing will crumble like a house of cards. Well, that's the hope anyway. But I look forward to it, certainly. Yes, I do. I hope you enjoyed that video today, folks and blokes. Yeah, let's keep it real, eh? Ready? Yay. Yay. Everything worked out good in the end, boob.